The moment my daughter-in-law stood up with her wine glass and said she wanted to honor the elder at the table, I felt the air in the room sharpen like a blade. I had been through 71 years of Savannah dinners, church receptions, retirement parties, and holiday gatherings. But nothing prepared me for the way Lila's voice carried through that historic restaurant near Forsyth Park. "Everyone," she said brightly, waving her glass, "let's take a moment to appreciate Marion. I mean, she tries so hard to keep up. Look at her. Still wearing those classic pieces from, what era was it again? Her smile stretched too wide. It is admirable when older women make an effort." A few cousins snorted. Someone actually clapped. Even the waiter paused. Evan, my son, kept his eyes on his plate. His shoulders tensed just slightly, as if he could shrink himself small enough to disappear. I folded my napkin across my lap and breathed evenly. "That is kind of you to say," I murmured. My voice was even, almost gentle. I could feel Lila searching my face for a reaction, any twitch, any crack she could feed on, but I held still. She kept going. "You know," she added, tapping her glass with her ring, "Marion still gives opinions on everything. Finance, fashion, careers. Things have changed so much since she was our age, but she tries." She let out a laugh. Bless her heart. The table erupted. The kind of laughter people give when they think cruelty is charming. Inside, something in me clicked into place, clean, cold, precise. Evan looked up at me finally. Eyes full of apology he would never speak aloud. Lila reached over and pinched his arm like she was rewarding a pet. I sat straight, lifted my water glass, and met Lila's gaze. "You've prepared quite the toast tonight. I just think families should be honest," she replied, sweetness dripping from every syllable. "And maybe we can all help you feel more modern." My smile didn't move. My pulse didn't jump. Instead, my thoughts settled into a quiet line. She didn't know. She had no idea who she was mocking. She had no idea the woman she was humiliating approved her department budgets and signed her performance reviews. She had no idea that the old-fashioned woman across from her was the final signature before any promotion could move forward at Riverfront Logistics. She thought I was powerless. The candles flickered along the polished wood table, throwing soft light against her carefully painted face. I studied her the way I used to study candidates during high-stakes corporate evaluations, slowly, silently, until every flaw became clear. Evan whispered, "Mom, please don't take it personally. She's just being playful." Lila leaned against him, triumphant. "See, he gets it." I didn't answer. I let the silence hold steady, let it wrap around me like armor. There is a kind of strength that comes with age, not loud, not showy, but steady. And in that moment, I felt every inch of it settle into my bones. Lila lifted her glass again, preparing for another round of mockery, already confident she owned the room. But I had already decided. While she laughed, while the family played along with her little performance, I made a quiet promise to myself tonight would be the last time she laughed at my expense, because this was the night everything shifted. This was the night I stopped being her target and started becoming her reckoning. And as the conversations picked back up and plates were cleared, the decision I made in that fragile pocket of silence began shaping the days ahead, pushing me toward the moment she would finally see exactly who she had been humiliating. I remember the first afternoon Lila stepped into my home in Savannah. She arrived with a bouquet of pale pink roses and a smile that looked like it had been practiced in a mirror. Evan was glowing beside her, proud and almost boyish again, the way he used to look when he brought home school projects he wanted me to admire. "Mom, this is Lila," he said, squeezing her hand. "I've told her everything about you." Lila leaned in immediately, arms open. "Mom!" she said warmly, placing a soft kiss on my cheek. I hope it's all good things. It caught me off guard. No one had called me that since my husband passed. The word slipped under my ribs. Unexpected and almost comforting. I'm Marion, I said gently, though her hand stayed on my arm as if claiming the space. Please, sit. Make yourselves comfortable. They followed me into the living room. I had just recovered from a health scare that left me weaker than I liked to admit. My doctors had warned me to slow down, but Evan had hardly left my side during those weeks. Seeing him happy now felt like a gift I did not want to question. This house, Lila said, glancing around. It's lovely. So, classic. She brushed her fingers along a framed photo of Evan as a child. It has that old Savannah charm. It's home, I answered. She smiled wider. It's cute for an older woman alone. Cozy. Evan didn't react, but I felt something tighten behind my ribs. It sounded like a compliment, but it landed with a quiet sting, a needle tucked inside cotton. I chose not to respond. Not out of confusion, but because I didn't know yet if I should trust what I heard. Lila perched beside Evan on the sofa. Evan told me he grew up with so much love here, she said, taking his hand. I want to give him the same. I want to build something stable with him. He squeezed her fingers. I finally found someone who gets me. Mom, I nodded, studying their faces. Evan had spent years drifting between jobs and relationships, always searching for someone who made him feel grounded. Lila seemed to hold him steady, just by touching his arm. I wanted to believe in her. I wanted him to be safe. Would you like tea? I asked. Only if you let me help, she said quickly, rising before I could answer. Mom, tell me where everything is. Again, that word, it softened me for a moment. I led her into the kitchen, pointing out the cabinets. This is such a sweet little space, she said as she opened drawers. A little outdated, but charming. It fits you. I inhaled slowly. I suppose it does. She looked at me over her shoulder, eyes bright. I'm just being honest. I think honesty is the best foundation for family. Her tone stayed sugary, but her gaze lingered a second too long, as if measuring me, as if I were something to be assessed, not welcomed. Evan walked in, breaking the moment. Everything all right? Perfect, Lila said, hooking her arm through his. Your mom is wonderful. He kissed her temple. Grateful. Told you. I handed her the tea tray. You can carry this. Of course, anything for family, she said, voice light as satin. We returned to the living room and spent the next hour talking about their plans, their dreams, and the future Lila wanted for them. She laughed easily, touched Evan often, and kept calling me Mom, each time with a sweetness that felt almost rehearsed. But when she thought I wasn't looking, her smile faded, replaced by something sharper, more calculating. I wasn't sure what it meant yet. I only knew that something inside me shifted quietly, almost imperceptibly, but enough to make me pay attention. By the time they left that evening, I stood at the doorway watching them walk down the path. Evan's hand wrapped around hers. I hoped she was everything she appeared to be. I hoped the shine was real. But the small, stinging comments lingered in the room after they were gone, like perfume that did not belong to me. And that was the first time I wondered what I had really welcomed into my son's life. Lila knew exactly how to perform when people were watching. The first time she joined me at Sunday service, she walked through the chapel doors with her arm tucked around mine as if she had always belonged there. A few of the older women from the choir approached us, smiling. Your daughter-in-law is just darling. Marion, Mrs. Cooper said. Lila squeezed my arm. I adore her, she replied before I could speak. She has been so welcoming. I feel blessed. Her voice had that soft Savannah warmth. sweet enough to sugar a whole table of tea. People lit up around her. She offered to help with bake sales, promised to volunteer at the next fundraiser, mentioned she wanted to learn my famous recipes. They loved her instantly. Evan beamed. "See, Mom," he whispered. "Everyone sees how great she is." I smiled, but something inside me held still, waiting. Later that afternoon, back at my house, the moment the door closed, her tone shifted. She picked up one of my cookbooks from the counter. "This is adorable," she said, flipping through the pages. I didn't know people still wrote recipes by hand. I wiped my hands on a towel. Old habits. She laughed. "Yes, very old. You should let me redo this for you. Your handwriting is sweet, like a schoolteacher from decades ago." Evan walked in just as she smiled again. "Sweet and perfect. Don't you just love your mom's little notebook?" she asked him. He kissed her cheek. "I think it's charming." "Of course you do," she said lightly, sliding the book back onto the counter. "I cooked supper that evening." And she stood beside me as if to help, but she touched nothing, just watched. "You still use this kind of seasoning?" she asked, lifting a jar between her fingers. "So traditional." "It works," I answered. "Well, some people like comfort over flavor," she said with a small shrug. "Nothing wrong with that." Evan entered again. Cheerful. Lila instantly brightened. "Love, your mom's teaching me her special dishes. She is so patient with me." He smiled. "She's always patient." Lila glanced at me over her shoulder, her smile cooling for a breath before she turned sweet again. That night, after they went home, I collected the dishes and tried not to let the comments bruise. I told myself she was adjusting, that maybe her words meant something different in her head than they did coming out. But the next week, when I stopped by their house with a basket of peach muffins, I paused on the porch as I heard her through the open kitchen window. "I swear, Evan," she said, laughing, "your mom is precious. She tries so hard to keep up. Did you see her handwriting? It looks like my grandmother's. And that decor so dated. It's like she froze in time." Evan murmured something I could not catch. Lila laughed again. "She means well. And if she listens to me, maybe we can update her a little, gently." I knocked before she could say more. She appeared at the door with the brightest smile I had ever seen. "Mom." What a lovely surprise. Her tone was honeyed, her arms outstretched. Behind her, Evan stood silently, unaware of the heaviness sitting just behind my ribs. I handed her the basket and kept my voice level. "Just thought you both might enjoy something warm." Her fingers brushed mine as she took it. "You always think of us. You're wonderful." I nodded and stepped back. That night, the first real shift happened inside me. I stopped explaining her behavior away. I stopped hoping she would soften. I began watching, really watching each small moment, each cutting remark, each sudden sweetness that came too easily when Evan walked into the room. She believed she had fooled me, but something in me had opened its eyes. I went back to Riverfront Logistics only twice a month, just enough to justify my role as a consultant and to ease the board through decisions they still wanted my fingerprints on. Retirement had not fully taken me out of the building. It only changed the pace. My old office sat smaller now, tucked near the administrative wing, but the work was familiar, predictable, safe. Gina Morales, the HR director, poked her head in with a bright smile. "Marion." I dropped the new reorganization files on your desk. Just the usual shuffle. "Thank you," I said, sliding my glasses on. "I'll look through them." She left me with a stack of folders, thick enough to cover the whole corner of my desk. I opened the first few without much thought. Departmental restructures, updated reporting lines, routine performance summaries. comforting. Steady things until one name froze me mid-page. Lila Carter. My chest tightened. I blinked twice, reading again to make sure I hadn't pulled the family version of her name into my work. Carter, not Ellison. I turned the page slowly, each movement careful. There it was, her department, her job title, her team responsibilities. And beside it, a small printed photo for internal identification. I leaned closer. It was Lila, the same smile she wore when she mocked my handwriting, the same eyes she used to win over the church ladies, the same woman who stood at my dinner table and measured my worth like a garment she planned to alter. I sat back, breath tight. For a moment, the world inside that small office went silent. The hum of the HVAC, the clicking keyboard from down the hall, everything faded. All I could see was her photo, and the realization forming like a slow, heavy tide rising inside me. She worked here, not in another branch, not in another city. In Savannah, I flipped to her notes, forcing my hands to stay steady. A sticky note from Gina flagged a concern over unexplained expenses in Lila's area. Another page listed performance review deadlines she had been complaining about at home. Just last week, she told Evan, laughing, "My clueless female boss is driving me crazy." Clueless, female, boss. I stared at the signature line next to her department's oversight. My name. Even in retirement. The board had kept my approval tied to teams with significant spending or high turnover, including hers. I whispered her words under my breath, tasting them again, clueless female boss. My pulse steadied. Not from panic, but from something sharper. Something precise. Gina knocked again gently. Everything all right? I turned the file closed, but kept my hand over it. Yes, I said softly. More than all right. She nodded and stepped away. I opened the folder again, slower this time, absorbing each detail with a different kind of clarity. All the small insults, all the little jabs, all the smirks she thought were invisible. She had been swinging at me from the safety of her imagined high ground. And the whole time, I had been standing above her quietly, invisibly, holding the authority she believed only other people possessed. I smoothed the edge of the folder, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settle into my palms. Not heavy this time, but grounding. She thought she was mocking an old woman with no relevance. She had no idea she'd been mocking her own oversight. The realization didn't scare me. It didn't confuse me. It steadied me, because now I knew exactly where she stood and exactly where I did. I didn't sleep much the night I discovered Lila's employee file. Her picture stayed in my mind like a painting someone had hung crooked on my wall. Every detail of her behavior clicked into place with a clarity I had been trying not to see. The next morning, Evan stopped by unannounced. He carried a paper cup from the cafe down the street and handed it to me awkwardly, like he had something else he wanted to say. "Mom," he began. "Lila asked if I could talk to you about a few things." I set the cup down. "What things?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "She thinks you work too hard or worry too much. And she wants to help take some responsibilities off your plate. For the family, for the future." There was a tremor under his words. Something rehearsed. Something he didn't fully believe but felt obligated to repeat. "What responsibilities does she mean?" I asked calmly. "Bills, planning, the house," he said. "She thinks you should relax more. She wants to help manage things. She's good with finances." He offered a thin laugh. "Better than I am." My stomach tightened. Not from fear, but from a cold recognition. I had known women like Lila when I was younger, climbing corporate ladders in Atlanta and later in Savannah, hungry for status, obsessed with image, always reaching upward. always trying to stand next to the people with the most power, hoping it would rub off on them. When Evan met her, she was renting a small apartment outside the historic district. She talked nonstop about old Savannah charm, charity galas, garden club culture communities you had to be invited into, communities she desperately wanted access to. You know she loves you, Evan added softly. And she wants us all to feel more united, united, I repeated, watching his expression. Is that what she said? He hesitated. She said families work best when the younger generation takes the lead. I knew exactly what she was doing. I had seen it 1,000 times in boardrooms belittle the person with authority, undermine their credibility, then declare you are the one who must take over. The pattern was almost textbook. But this time, she wasn't after a position in a corporation. She was after my home, my influence, my son. I sat across from Evan, letting the quiet stretch. She's managing your finances now, isn't she? His shoulders stiffened. Well, yes, mostly. She's better at it. And she wants to make sure we build a future. Does she manage your accounts, or both of yours? He avoided my eyes. Ours. Together. There it was, the piece that snapped into place like a lock turning. I thought back to the small comments Lila made about my guest room layout. The antique furniture. The value of the house in the historic district. She had always looked around as if assessing. Calculating. And the more I saw, the more I understood humiliating me wasn't pettiness. It was strategy. She needed Evan to see me as old-fashioned, incapable, fragile. She needed to loosen my influence over him to tighten her own. Mom, she just wants to help, Evan insisted, his voice softening. And she wants to take on more with the family. Too. Holidays. Budgeting. Planning things for you. For me. I echoed, yes, he said, nodding. She thinks it's time someone else stepped in. I folded my hands in my lap. And you agree, he swallowed. I think she means well. It wasn't his fault. That was the worst part. He trusted love. He trusted the picture she painted for him. He trusted the sweetness she saved only for moments when he was watching. I appreciate you telling me, I said, truly. Evan looked relieved, unaware of the storm gathering behind my calm. He hugged me before he left, whispering, I just want us all to get along. When he closed the door behind him, the quiet returned, settling heavy and unblinking. Lila wasn't trying to win me over. She was trying to remove me. And I finally understood why her cruelty felt so deliberate. She wasn't fighting for a place in the family. She was fighting for control of it. Gina waited until my office door was closed before she spoke. She always did that when the matter was delicate. Her voice was low, steady, the way it had been back when I mentored her as a young HR analyst. Marion, she said, placing a slim folder on my desk. I think you'll want to see this. I adjusted my glasses and opened it. Inside were a series of line items, expense reimbursements from different weeks, small transfers, duplicated approvals. At first glance, nothing looked explosive. $40 here, $70 there, a couple of hundred spread across different accounts. The kind of numbers most managers would brush off, but the pattern was unmistakable. This is from Lila's unit, I asked. Gina nodded. We flagged it because of the frequency. It's minor, but consistent. A few analysts thought it was just sloppy filing, but I know your instinct for patterns. I traced a finger down the page, each line suddenly heavier than the amount attached to it. Have you spoken to her? Not yet. I wanted to bring it to you first, she said, pulling a chair to sit across from me. There's something else too. I closed the folder halfway. Go on. She submitted a request last week, Gina said carefully. For increased purchasing authority. I stilled. How much of an increase? Up to $5,000. per transaction. My jaw tightened. And on what grounds? She said her team is growing, that she needs more autonomy. I let out a slow breath. Has the board approved it? Not yet. It's pending your review. Of course it was. She had no idea that the final signature went through me. The same clueless female boss she vented about over dinner was the one holding her request. Gina studied my face. If you want, I can start a formal inquiry. Quietly. Not yet. I slid the folder back toward myself. I want to see where this goes. She frowned slightly. You think she'll slip again? I think she already has, I replied, but she doesn't know we're watching. Gina nodded slowly. Then I'll keep tracking it. But Marion, be careful. If she's trying to climb fast, people like that can get reckless. I gave a small, measured smile. Let her. She exhaled, stood, and paused at the door. You always had a way of seeing 3 steps ahead. Just tell me when to move. When she left, I opened the folder again and stared at the neat columns of numbers. In my years at Riverfront Logistics, I'd seen every kind of personality rise through the company, ambitious, brilliant, desperate, manipulative. But the ones who scared me most weren't the loud climbers. It was the quiet ones who stole in increments, believing small amounts were invisible. Lila was one of them. Not bold enough to risk $200,000 at once. Bold enough to take 200 in a way she thought no one would notice. The realization settled into me with a cold certainty. This wasn't carelessness. This wasn't an accident. This was a strategy, small bites to test how far she could go unnoticed. I leaned back, folded my hands, and let the silence stretch across the room. Every step she took now would tug at the line she didn't even know she was caught on, and I was not going to pull it yet, not until she tightened it herself. Evan called that evening, his voice tight in a way I recognized immediately. He only sounded like that when he was trying to hold too many emotions at once. Mom, he said. Lila's upset. Can I come by? I told him yes. 10 minutes later, he stepped into my living room, running a hand through his hair like he had done 1,000 times as a boy. When he didn't know how to say what he was feeling, he didn't sit. He paced. She thinks you're judging her, he blurted. She said she feels unwelcome. I folded my hands. Did she tell you what happened? He stopped pacing. She said you're cold toward her, that you glare at her, that you don't like her because she's younger. I let his words settle, not because they surprised me, but because they hurt in that slow, quiet way only your own child's confusion can hurt. Evan, I said calmly, I have not judged her age, and I have not glared at her. She cried. He interrupted, voice cracking. She said she tries so hard to be close to you. She said you shut her out. I looked at him closely. His eyes were red-rimmed, not from anger, but from guilt. Lila had done it again, twisted reality until the person listening couldn't find the ground. Sit down, I said gently. He did, and I could see his shoulders slump. Evan, I began. You know me. You know how I speak. You know how I treat family. Yes, I do, he admitted. But Lila, she's really hurt. She thinks you don't want her around. She said that I asked. He nodded. She said you hate young women who are louder and more confident than you. I inhaled slowly. She said that, yes, he whispered. I leaned back, letting the truth sharpen inside me. Lila wasn't just insecure. She was strategic. Every small insult she'd delivered to me, she'd now flipped into a wound she claimed I'd delivered to her. Evan, I said softly, I don't hate your wife. I don't resent her age. I have only ever tried to welcome her. He rubbed his forehead. She said you're threatened by her. I'm just caught in the middle. I need you both to get along. I felt my chest tighten, not from anger, but from the grief that comes when someone you raised with tenderness starts doubting the very foundation you gave them. Evan, I said, keeping my tone level. Has she ever said anything to you about my cooking, my home, my handwriting? He frowned. What do you mean? She makes comments. I said, small ones, disguised as jokes. He hesitated. She said she was just teasing. She said you didn't mind. I nodded slowly. And did you notice she only teases when you're not in the room? His breath caught. Confusion flickered across his face just for a moment, but then his shoulders tensed again. Mom, please, he whispered, don't make this harder. She loves you. She wants this family to feel united. Can you just try be nicer to her? For me, those words were the twist of the knife, the request that told me exactly how deep her hooks had gone. I hear you, I said quietly. He reached out, squeezing my hand. Thank you. I just want peace. When he left, the house felt heavier, the air thicker. Not because of what he believed, but because of what I finally understood. Lila wasn't just manipulating situations. She was manipulating my son. She was shaping his fears, guiding his guilt, turning his loyalty into a weapon she could swing without ever raising her voice. And in that moment, I knew I had to protect him not from her anger, but from the version of reality she was slowly teaching him to trust. I walked into Riverfront Logistics on Monday with a decision already made. If Lila wanted power, if she wanted authority, then she would have to withstand the kind of scrutiny that came with it. And scrutiny, I knew, revealed everything, especially when someone believed they were too clever to be caught. I called Gina into my office. She arrived quickly, notebook in hand. I want a department audit, I said. Routine, low profile, no announcements. She blinked. Whose department? Lila's. Understanding flickered in her eyes. All right, I'll loop in legal. Quietly, I repeated. No alerts sent to her team. Once Gina left, I emailed Mr. Patel from legal, requested specific transaction reviews, and sat back in my chair. My years in the company had taught me that people who stole rarely started big. They tested the waters first. They took small amounts to see if anyone blinked. By noon, Gina returned with a stack of printouts and a grim expression. Do you have a minute? Close the door, I told her. She sat across from me, sliding the papers forward. We've gone through the first round. There are missing invoices. Several spreadsheets look adjusted. Columns don't match totals. Approvals are inconsistent. I took the pages, scanning the messy trail. These aren't rookie mistakes. I said quietly, no. Gina agreed. Someone is doing this intentionally. I kept reading. The numbers forming a picture that only a seasoned eye could understand. It wasn't about the totals, not yet. It was about the motion, the pattern, the same hands making the same type of edits across different dates. Anything else? I asked. Gina hesitated. There's something you should hear from legal directly. She stepped out and returned with Mr. Patel. He was always calm, even during crises. Today, though, his brow was tight. We found something concerning, he said, placing a separate sheet on my desk. This transfer was flagged this morning. A recurring payment from Lila's cost center. The amount wasn't large, but the recipient didn't match any vendor in our system. And I asked, when I went back to pull the supporting documents, he said slowly, the line was gone. I looked up at him. Gone deleted, he confirmed. It was there at 9 by 10:15. The entire transaction disappeared from the active ledger. Gina folded her arms tightly. Only someone with specific access could remove a line like that. And she has that access, I asked. She does, Gina replied. She requested expanded privileges 2 weeks ago. They weren't approved yet. but she still has limited editing rights. I stared at the empty space on the paper where the numbers should have been. Did we retrieve a backup? Yes, Patel said. Our off-site server still had the earlier version, but if we hadn't pulled it in time, he didn't have to finish. My fingers pressed against the page. She's covering her tracks. Or, Gina added, someone is helping her. I looked at both of them. Keep going. Don't confront her. Don't change permissions. Not yet. Gina frowned. You want her to think she got away with it. She has to believe she's invisible. I said, that's when people glow in the dark. Both of them nodded. As they stood to leave, Patel paused at the door. Marion, if she is doing this, she's confident. Too confident. I know, I replied. When they were gone, I leaned back and let the pieces form a sharper picture. Lila wasn't stumbling, she wasn't careless. She was deliberate, testing the edges of what she could erase, what she could manipulate, what she could hide. And someone with that much certainty didn't stop on her own. She stopped only when someone made her. Gina and Mr. Patel came into my office just after noon, both of them wearing the same expression, controlled, professional, but tense in the way people look when something important has slipped out of their hands. Marion, Patel said quietly, we have a problem. My stomach tightened. Show me. Gina placed a single printed sheet in front of me. The audit team tried to pull the supporting documents for the recurring transfers. One of the core files, the one we flagged yesterday, is corrupted. Corrupted how I asked. Unreadable, she said. Completely. Patel folded his arms. We tried opening the backup from our secondary server. That file is corrupted too. I stared at them. Both copies. Yes, Patel said. And without that file, we can't prove the pattern. We can't show intentional misuse. A formal investigation would stall. A cold sweep moved through my chest, sudden and sharp. I had known Lila was reckless, but this was purposeful, deliberate. She had either found someone skilled enough to hide her messes, or she had learned the system well enough to erase her own footprints. I kept my voice steady. Is there anything you can salvage? Patel shook his head. Not without risking the integrity of the entire audit. If we push the system too hard, we could lose more. Gina's eyes softened. I am so sorry. We should have caught it sooner. For the first time since this began, something inside me cracked. The fear was small, fragile, but real fear that she might slip through the cracks. That the woman who mocked me over dinner might walk away untouched while I watched justice dissolve like ink in water. I exhaled slowly. If the file is gone, then the trail is gone. Patel's silence was confirmation. When they left my office, I sat staring at the empty space where that file should have been. It felt like standing on a dock watching a ship drift just out of reach, knowing I had seconds before the tide carried it away completely. A soft knock came a few minutes later. It wasn't Gina or Patel. It was a young analyst from Lila's unit, Kara Dalton, bright-eyed, barely 30. I barely knew her beyond hallway greetings. Ms. Ellison, she whispered, closing the door behind her. I do not have long. I straightened. Kara, what is it? She clutched a flash drive in her hand like it was something dangerous. I should not have this, she said. But I made a personal backup of the shared folder 2 days ago. I do that sometimes when the system glitches. I stared at her. A backup. She nodded, nerves shaking her voice. I heard the audit team asking about the corrupted file, and I recognized the timestamp. I thought you might need this. She placed the flash drive on my desk and stepped back, as if distance might protect her. Kara, I said softly, you understand what you're giving me. Her eyes flickered. I understand what is happening in that department, and I cannot pretend I do not. She swallowed. But please do not involve my name. I won't. I said. She exhaled with visible relief. Good. Then I should go before anyone notices. When the door shut behind her, I took a breath, plugged the drive into my computer, and opened the folder. There it was. The missing file. The untouched version. I clicked through line after line, watching the numbers reveal themselves in perfect clarity. Luxury purchases disguised as office costs. Reimbursements for high-end boutiques. Transfers labeled as client gifts with no client attached. Shoes. Jewelry. Designer clothing. Weekly. Sometimes twice a week. Lila had been stealing in style. I printed everything. Page after page sliding from the machine as if the truth had been waiting for its moment to speak. By the time the last sheet landed in the tray, my panic had evaporated. Not because the danger was gone, but because I finally understood the shape of what I was facing. She had hidden her tracks, but someone else had preserved them. Someone who owed me nothing. Someone who had no reason to protect me beyond their own sense of right and wrong. And as I gathered the papers into a single stack, the weight of them felt steady in my hands, solid enough to hold, solid enough to use. The expenses didn't lie. The same unfamiliar recipient kept appearing small transfers, regular charges, and payments that made no sense for office work. The address listed beside them led to a small complex near Victory Drive. Not a luxury building, but discreet, tucked away, chosen with purpose. I drove there on a Wednesday afternoon, the sun sharp and low. I didn't tell Gina. I didn't tell Patel. I didn't tell Evan. Some things I needed to see with my own eyes. The hallway smelled faintly of paint, as if the building had been recently renovated. I reached the door that matched the invoices. Unit 23. I knocked once. Silence. Again. Nothing. Then I tried the handle. It opened. The room was neat. Too neat. No clutter. No personal warmth, just carefully arranged things that didn't belong to the life Lila pretended to live. A second phone sat charging on the counter. Newer than the one she used at home. Not a work phone, not something she would ever explain to Evan. I stepped farther in. A row of shopping bags lined the wall, designer names. The same ones from the reimbursement sheets. Dresses with tags still on them hung from a portable rack. Shoes in untouched boxes. Receipts tucked neatly inside each bag. As if she was building a curated version of herself separate from the one she showed my son. I opened a drawer. More receipts. Dozens. It wasn't chaos. It was a system. Then I saw the stack of wrapped gifts on a small table near the window. Pale silver wrapping. Matching ribbons. Her style. One box was half open. The card slid slightly out. I picked it up. To Julian, the card read, "For your promotion, proud of you, a man's name, not a coworker I recognized. Not a family member. Not anyone she had ever mentioned in months of conversations." My chest tightened, but not in shock, in understanding. Lila wasn't merely lying, Cecil. She wasn't just stealing. She was building a second life, one she funded with company money, hidden under layers of charm and smiles and manipulation. I set the box down carefully and moved to the small desk in the corner. A printed document lay there, a lease, her name on it, signed 6 months ago. 6 months. Around the same time she started pushing Evan to let her manage everything. Around the same time she began testing her control over him and over me. The front door creaked suddenly, and I froze. Footsteps approached. A man's voice hummed lightly, then hushed, as if he were on the phone. "Yeah, I'm here. She said she'd meet me later. I know, she's been busy." He stepped into the room, then stopped cold when he saw me standing there. He wasn't tall, he wasn't imposing. He looked startled, confused, then cautious. "Who are you?" he asked. I straightened, keeping my voice steady. "My name is Marion Ellison." Recognition flickered in his eyes slowly, painfully. "Evan's mother," he said. He didn't ask what I was doing there. He didn't deny anything. He simply set his keys down on the table like a man preparing for a conversation he'd known would come eventually. "I didn't expect you," he said quietly. "I didn't expect any of this." I replied. He swallowed. "She said she would tell him soon. Of course she did. Lies don't die easily. They stretch until they snap." I walked past him, keeping my steps steady. My breaths controlled. At the door, I paused. "Whatever she told you," I said. "She told someone else the opposite." He lowered his eyes. "I can see that now, outside." The sunlight felt harsher. The truth always did. I had proof. I had answers. I had facts that could break my son's entire sense of safety. But holding those papers in my bag, the weight of them pressed differently, not as power, not as revenge, but as something far heavier. I knew what this would do to Evan. And nothing in my life had prepared me for the moment I would have to hand him the truth. I laid everything out on my dining table, each piece of evidence forming a landscape of betrayal receipts for luxury clothes, reimbursement forms marked as client gifts, the hidden lease signed 6 months ago, and the photos I had taken inside the apartment near Victory Drive. The pages didn't look dramatic at first glance. They looked like ordinary paperwork. But I had lived long enough to know the smallest documents could destroy the largest lies. I gathered them into a neat stack, pressing out the wrinkles with the flat of my hand. My fingers trembled only once. When I reached for an envelope, a simple white one, harmless. Too harmless for what it needed to carry. Evan's voice echoed in my mind, his pleading tone, his quiet desperation. "She loves you. She wants unity. Be nicer to her." Those words had cut deeper than any insult Lila had thrown my way, because they came from a place inside him she had already claimed. I sat down with a blank sheet of paper and uncapped my pen. I hadn't written him a letter in years, not since he left for college. When I filled 2 pages telling him how proud I was, now I wasn't proud. I was afraid. "Evan," I wrote, then stopped. My hand tightened around the pen. "How do you tell your child that the person they trust most is a stranger?" I began again, slower this time. I didn't use dramatic language. I didn't scold. I simply told him what I had discovered, how it connected, and why I couldn't stay silent. My handwriting wavered only once, right after the sentence about the apartment. When I reached the end, I wrote the one thing I wanted him to feel above everything else. "I love you enough to tell you the truth, even when it breaks us both." When I finished, I folded the letter and slid it into the envelope with the documents. My hand hovered over the flap. I could still choose not to do this. I could protect him from the pain for another day, another week, another moment. I stood abruptly, walked to the sink, and held the envelope over it. All I needed was one match, one flame, 1 second of weakness, and the truth would disappear in a curl of smoke. I reached for the matchbox. The front door opened. Mary and Nora's voice filled the hallway, warm and familiar in a way that grounded me. I tried calling. You didn't answer. I lowered the envelope but didn't turn around. I was busy. She stepped into the kitchen and looked at the papers still on the table. Her expression softened with something like sorrow. "You found more?" "Yes." She moved closer, placing a hand on my arm. "And now you're scared to tell him." I didn't answer. Nora gently took the matchbox from my fingers. "Truth doesn't destroy," she said quietly. "Lies do." I swallowed hard. "He loves her. He loves the woman he thinks she is," she replied. "Not the one you found." The words settled deep, steadying something inside me. Nora squeezed my shoulder. "Give him the truth. Marion, he deserves the chance to choose the life he wants, not the one she built around him." I looked down at the envelope, plain, light, but heavy enough to change everything. I sealed it with one firm press of my thumb, set it aside, and exhaled. Not because I felt relieved, but because the moment of hesitation was finally over. Tomorrow, I would give Evan the envelope. And whatever came after would be real, not the lie he had been living. I picked up the stack, held it close to my chest, and let the weight of it settle. I called Lila 2 days later, keeping my tone warm enough to sound harmless. "I'm thinking of hosting a small family celebration dinner," I said. "Just something to bring everyone together." She brightened immediately. I could hear her smile through the phone. "Marian, that is perfect. I've been telling Evan we need more family gatherings. What's the occasion?" "No occasion," I replied. "Just family." She laughed lightly. "Then let me help. I know exactly what to wear. And I can coordinate the decorations if you want." "Of course," I said. "Your taste is always memorable." She took that as a compliment. "You can count on me." When I hung up, I sat in silence, letting my heartbeat settle. This wasn't about revenge, but it wasn't about spectacle. It was control, something I had lost piece by piece and was finally ready to take back. By the next morning, I had already arranged the dining room, pulled out the set of dishes Evan loved as a child, and contacted a handful of extended family members, aunts, cousins, 2 in-laws who had always watched Lila with curiosity they never voiced. "Is everything all right?" my cousin Margaret asked on the phone. "Yes," I said. "I simply want everyone there." She paused. "It'll be a full house." "That's the intention." Lila arrived an hour early the evening of the dinner, stepping inside with the energy of someone entering a stage. "Oh, Marian," she gasped, looking around. "You've done wonders. This room looks so elegant. It might even outshine my place." I gave her a polite nod. "Thank you for coming early." She brushed past me, taking over instantly, adjusting napkins, rearranging centerpieces, adding ribbons to things that never needed ribbons. Evan followed her with a box of wine, looking tired in the way a man looks when he anticipates conflict but hopes for peace. "Mom," he said softly, "I'm glad you're doing this." "So am I," I replied. Lila leaned toward him, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. "See, she's trying." Evan squeezed her hand. Guests began arriving soon after. The air filled with greetings, laughter, and the shifting noise of plates being set out. Lila glided from person to person, touching arms, giving quick hugs, smiling with her full teeth like she was hosting a gala on River Street. "Marian," she called across the room, "they adore this place. You should let me help you redecorate sometime. I have so many ideas." Her relatives chuckled politely. Mine exchanged glances. I only smiled. When Evan stepped into the hallway to hang coats, I followed quietly, the envelope tucked into my hand. He turned at the sound of my footsteps. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said softly. "I need you to hold something for me, not for tonight. For later." He frowned slightly. "What is it?" I placed the sealed envelope into the inside pocket of his coat and smoothed the fabric. "Read alone," I murmured. "Not at the table." He looked down at the coat, confused, but didn't question me. "All right, if that's what you want." Inside the dining room, Lila's laughter rose above the others, bright, confident, almost triumphant. She believed tonight was hers to orchestrate, her performance to deliver. I stepped back into the doorway and watched her twirl a strand of hair while telling a story I knew she had embellished for effect. People laughed. She glowed. She controlled the room the way she controlled Evan through charm and careful curating. She didn't look at me once. The table filled. Conversations grew louder, and for a moment, the evening seemed almost peaceful, almost. But my eyes stayed on Evan. His hand brushed the pocket of his coat once, a brief and unconscious motion. The envelope was there, waiting, and the truth, contained inside paper and ink. sat quietly between us, heavier than any dish on that table. Not yet spoken, not yet opened, but already changing everything. The dinner began smoothly enough, plates filled with food, conversations spilled across the table, and the warm lantern lights cast a soft glow on everyone's faces. Lila had positioned herself near the center, exactly where she wanted to be, with Evan beside her, like a quiet accessory. She glanced at me every now and then, quick, assessing looks as if checking whether I still fit the role she carved for me. "Marion," she called brightly over the chatter. "Did you remember to salt the potatoes? I know your memory sometimes slips when you're rushing." A few guests chuckled. One of Evan's cousins said, Come on, Lila, she's doing great." Lila folded her hands on the table with the grace of someone who practiced her expressions in a mirror. "I'm just teasing," she said. "You know how older minds wander." Evan looked down at his plate. He didn't defend me. He didn't laugh either. He just stayed still, caught between loyalty and habit. I kept my tone steady. "Everything has been seasoned." "Oh, I'm sure," she said, sipping her wine. "You've always been very traditional." "People love that." She tilted her head. "Even if you struggle with new recipes." A few more laughs floated around the table, hesitant but present. Lila rewarded them with another bright smile. My cousin Margaret cleared her throat. "I think everything tastes wonderful." Lila nodded politely. "Yes, it's good. I just like helping." She tapped Evan's arm. "We have to keep her young." "Right," Evan forced a smile. "She's fine, Lila. She tries." "Evan." Lila sighed dramatically. "That's what matters." The words landed like invisible blows, each one coated in sugar. I watched her, my expression unchanged, my pulse steady. She performed better when she sensed no resistance. Later, as dessert plates were passed around, she turned her attention to me again. "Marion, are you okay over there?" she asked loudly. "You're so quiet tonight. Your steps seemed slow earlier. We want to make sure you don't fall or anything." The table murmured. Some nodded sympathetically. I looked at her calmly. "I'm doing perfectly well." "Oh, I know," she said gently, placing a hand on her chest. "But if you ever need help, I'm here. Evan and I have already talked about checking in more often. We don't want you feeling useless." Evan's head snapped up. "Lila." But she waved him off. "It's fine, love. I'm just being honest. Age comes for everyone. Even opinions get old. Isn't that right?" No one laughed this time. The air tightened, thick and slow. But Lila mistook the silence for approval. She lifted her glass and clinked it lightly with her fork. "Let's toast to Marion," she said. "She's practically retired from life, but she's still giving it her best." A few gasps broke through the table. Someone muttered, "That was rude." Evan whispered her name sharply. "Lila." But she just looked at me, waiting for me to crack, waiting for me to shrink, waiting for me to give her the reaction that would confirm her power. I met her gaze, my voice calm enough to unsettle her. "Thank you for your honesty." She blinked. Just once, thrown off by the steadiness in my tone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I didn't defend myself or attempt humor. I simply let the silence fall where it needed to fall. A silence that made several relatives shift in their seats. A silence that made Lila look away first. A silence that marked the exact moment the storm inside me stopped gathering and began moving forward. Dinner had settled into a low hum of conversation when the first phone buzzed. A sharp, vibrating sound cut through the room, and several guests glanced around. Lila ignored it. She was mid-story, one hand in the air, describing how her department at Riverfront Logistics would fall apart without her. The second buzz came seconds later. This time, she pulled the phone from her purse. glanced at the screen, and slid it face down on the table. "Sorry," she said lightly. "Work. They cannot function without me." But her smile faltered not enough for most to notice, but enough for me to see the flicker at the corner of her mouth. She adjusted her napkin and kept talking, louder now, performing harder. "So anyway," she continued, "I told my boss well, my clueless boss. A third buzz, then a soft chime." She went silent. Evan's phone buzzed next. He frowned, pulling it out of his pocket. "Probably the school," he murmured. Standing from his chair, "I'll take this outside." He stepped into the hallway. Phone pressed to his ear, the door closed quietly behind him. Lila laughed too loudly, raising her glass again. "He is always so responsible," she said. "Such a good man. He just needs guidance." More murmurs of discomfort. My family had grown uneasy with her tone. Her phone chimed again, this time. She grabbed it quickly, shielding the screen with her hand. Her eyes darted across the notification, widening. A cold flush crept up her neck. She whispered, barely audible, "Suspension." Her fingers trembled. Another notification appeared. I didn't move. I didn't speak. The calm inside me felt like stone. She cleared her throat and pasted on a smile. "Excuse me," she said, standing abruptly. "I need to reply to this. Just a moment." She stepped away from the table but didn't go far, only to the corner of the dining room where she could still watch everyone. She opened the email, eyes flying across the lines. Her lips parted in disbelief. Suspension pending investigation. Unauthorized transactions. Formal review scheduled. Immediate freeze of purchasing privileges. The words reflected in her expression shock, turning into denial. Denial turning into panic. "What is this?" she whispered to herself. Cousin Margaret leaned toward me. "Is she all right?" "She is processing something," I said evenly. Across the room, Lila whipped her head toward the hallway door, as if sensing that Evan would be the next barrier between her and the truth. A moment later, the door opened. Evan walked back in slowly. Too slowly. His face had drained of color. He held the envelope in one hand, the letter unfolded in the other. "Mom," he said quietly, stepping into the light. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Conversation stopped. Forks froze midair. Someone gasped softly. Lila stiffened. "Evan, what's wrong? What is that?" He didn't answer her. He looked straight at me, hurt, frightened, but clearer than he had been in months. "Why didn't you tell me?" he repeated. "I needed proof." I said gently. He shook his head, not in anger, but in heartbreak. "You had it. You had all of it." Lila rushed toward him. "Evan, no. Whatever she told you." He held up a hand. "Lila, stop." She blinked rapidly, searching his face for the softness she always counted on. "Love, listen to me. She's lying. She has always been jealous of us. Jealous of me. Jealous of you." His voice cracked. "This is a lease." He lifted the paper from the envelope. "This is a lease for an apartment I didn't know existed." Lila's jaw tightened. "I can explain, and these," he continued, "are receipts, luxury things, bought with company money." He held up another page. "You said they were client gifts." "They are." She insisted. "You know how clients are." He cut her off again. "And this?" He produced the photo from the apartment. "Who is Julian Silence?" She looked at the ground, then at him, then at me, then at the guests whose eyes were fixed on her, not with amusement now, but with something far sharper. Lila straightened slowly, her smile collapsing. "Evan, you're taking her side after everything I've done for this family." "No," he said, voice low. "You did those things for yourself." Her breath hitched. Panic finally reached her eyes, and for the first time all evening, She understood. The room was no longer laughing with her. The room was no longer watching her perform. The room was watching her unravel. Evan placed the stack of printed evidence in the center of the dinner table, his hand trembling as he spread the pages out one by one. The room grew so quiet that even the lantern lights seemed to hum. "These are your transactions," he said, his voice breaking. "Your reimbursements, your approvals, your signatures." Lila stared at the papers as if they were written in another language. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "Your mother planted this. She has always been jealous of me." Margaret inhaled sharply. Jealous of what? Lila shot her a glare. "Stay out of this. You do not understand our family dynamics." I remained silent. It was Evan's moment now. He picked up one sheet and held it inches from her face. "This is a charge for a necklace worth $400, labeled as a client gift. There is no client name. That was a misunderstanding." She said quickly, "People in my department make mistakes. You filled out the form." He replied. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. Another cousin leaned forward. "Is that your handwriting?" Lila slammed her hand on the table. "Stop, all of you. This is none of your business. It is when you humiliate Marion in front of us," Margaret said. "And it is when you lie." Lila spun toward me. "You orchestrated this. You want Evan to yourself. You have always resented me." Before I could speak, Evan stepped in front of me. "She did not do this. You did." The air cracked. Something inside Lila's expression twisted, fear pushing through her mask. Then my phone vibrated in my lap. I answered quietly. "Yes, Mr." Patel's calm voice filled my ear. "Marion, the board has approved the immediate termination. I will file the documentation within the hour." "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. Lila heard enough to freeze. "Termination," she repeated. "You cannot fire me. It is already approved," I said softly. Her eyes widened, then blazed. "You," she hissed. "I will destroy your company. I will sue all of you." Evan held up another paper. "Before you do that, look at this." He placed the page in front of her, a single reimbursement form, her signature at the bottom, crisp, clear, final. Lila stared at it. Her mouth opened, then closed without sound. The color drained from her face. "You signed it," Evan said. "Every week, every purchase, every lie." She pushed back from the table so fast her chair scraped violently across the floor. "You are all insane." She spat. "This means nothing. I have explanations. I have." She looked at the crowd, faces she once charmed, now cold with disbelief. She grabbed her purse, shoved the papers away, and stormed toward the door. "Lila," Evan called after her, "don't leave like this." She turned only long enough to glare. "You and your mother deserve each other." Then she slammed the door behind her, her heels clicking down the porch steps until the sound disappeared into the night. Evan stood frozen, staring at the empty doorway. His hands shook. His voice trembled. When he finally turned to me, there was no anger left, only a deep, aching sorrow. I reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. The evidence lay scattered across the table. The truth finally unhidden. But the room felt heavier than any victory could ever feel. Evan arrived at my house the next morning with a duffel bag and eyes that looked years older than they had the night before. He did not say much, just stepped inside, set the bag down, and exhaled like he had been holding his breath for months. "You can stay here as long as you need," I told him. He nodded, rubbing his hands together. I don't know where else to go right now." "You do not need anywhere else," I said. For the first time in weeks, his shoulders lowered. He settled into the guest room, barely touching the food I made, barely speaking except to say, "Thank you." It was the kind of heartbreak that didn't erupt loudly, it just settled into a person's bones. One quiet inch at a time. At work. The fallout began immediately. Patel called daily, updating me on the investigation. The company had to reconstruct the accounts, trace missing funds, and stabilize the department Lila had hollowed out with her theft. I found another discrepancy. He reported one afternoon. Close to $2,000 this time. "We will fix it," I said. "We always fix things," he replied, "even when we shouldn't need to." I stayed later than usual that week, sitting with Gina and two analysts as we pieced together a complete picture of the damage. It was tedious. Painful work, but necessary. Someone had to clean up the trail Lila left behind. Outside the office, the Savannah community began whispering. Word travels fast in a city that still behaves like a small town when gossip is involved. People stopped asking about her charity events. Invitations stopped arriving for her. She did not appear at the church. She did not message the group chats. She simply vanished from the places she once treated like stages. On the fourth evening after the dinner, Evan sat beside me on the couch, staring blankly at the muted television. His phone buzzed. Lila. Her name lit up the screen like a spark in a dry field. He didn't answer. It buzzed again and again. "Do you want me to take it?" I asked. He shook his head, finally unlocking the phone and opening the message. "Evan, please, I made mistakes. Let me explain. I love you. I can fix everything. Please don't give up on us." He stared at the words for a long time, jaw clenched, breathing shallow. "Do you still want to talk to her?" I asked quietly. He didn't look at me. "No, I don't know who she is. I don't think I ever did." Another message arrived. Just one more chance. He closed his eyes, then hit the button that ended it. Block caller. He set the phone on the table and leaned back, his voice thin but certain. "I need peace. Mom, I need to start over." I reached for his hand, and he let me hold it. The house was quiet, but not empty. Not anymore. He stayed like that for a long while, breathing, thinking, adjusting to a reality he hadn't chosen, but could finally see clearly. And as I sat beside him, I realized that closure wasn't something handed to you. It wasn't something waiting at the end of a long, painful road. It was something you stepped into yourself. Chippewa Square looked almost unreal in the early dusk, the lamplights just starting to glow against the settling gold of the evening. I walked along the edge of the square, the air warm enough to feel like a hand resting gently on my shoulder. For the first time in months, my breath felt easy. Evan had left for his therapy appointment an hour before. He told me, quietly, that he wanted to rebuild himself before he rebuilt anything else. "I need to understand why I ignored so much," he said as he stood in the doorway. "And I need to forgive myself." I cupped his cheek and told him I was proud of him. And I meant it. Every word. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. I didn't look at it. Not yet. Instead, I kept walking along the curve of the square, past the old oaks, past the benches where tourists sat with ice cream cups, past the slow quiet of a Savannah evening settling itself into place. Each step felt lighter than the last, as if shedding a weight I had carried too long. When I reached the fountain, I finally exhaled deeply, not because everything was fixed, not because we were healed, but because the truth had finally had space to breathe. Nora joined me a few minutes later, her footsteps familiar on the path. "You look different," she said, lighter. "Yes." She linked her arm with mine. "How's Evan?" "He's trying," I said. "Really trying." She smiled. "He'll get there." "You both will." I nodded, watching the water shimmer under the lights. "I never wanted revenge," I said. "I only wanted the truth to stand on its own feet." And it did. Nora replied, "You didn't destroy her. She destroyed herself." I didn't answer. Instead, I let the silence sit with us. Not heavy, not painful, just present. My phone buzzed again. Nora raised a brow. "You going to check that I pulled the phone out and looked at the screen? Lila, a single preview line. Just listen." I stared at it for a moment. Long enough to acknowledge it. Long enough to accept that it would never give me anything worth holding. Then I locked the phone without opening the message. Nora exhaled. Good. She doesn't get the last word. I said, "Not anymore." We walked a few more steps before she stopped and squeezed my hand. "You protected your son. You protected yourself. No one gets to judge how far a mother should go." I felt the truth of that settle inside me. Later, at home, Evan returned from therapy and sat beside me on the couch. "Mom," he said softly, "thank you for everything." I rested my head on his shoulder. "We're moving forward," I whispered. "Together," he nodded. Together. The night settled around us quiet, gentle, whole, and for the first time, I didn't feel the storm behind me or ahead of me. I only felt the peace I had carved out with my own hands. "If a mother protects her child," I said softly, more to myself than to Evan, "is there really such a thing as going too far?" Hours later, when I set my phone aside for the night, Lila's unread message remained exactly where it belonged, unopened, unanswered, unimportant. I had survived the storm, and the peace I felt now was one I finally allowed myself to keep. If you want more stories like this, don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe.